I mean, he's on the phone. Wouldn't you think that you would have seen Nolan on the bottom of on the floor or something? Or scrambling around, or everybody in a small space on the boat looking at him or something. I mean,
What an absolute wild thing to say when so many people have seen this video and slowed it down and noticed that there's either like a hand or a foot or something that comes flying up when they tug on the toe right there. Like, I can't believe that they said that. But please, please, please put out this interview. Please give me something to tear apart. Y'all, I swear I see Warren stop breathing when he starts this sentence, and he doesn't move again until he closes it out.
That's the question at the center of one specific piece of footage that's been circulating for weeks. Whether in the middle of a phone call, on a boat that small with that many people on it, someone would have seen Nolan on the floor, or gathered around him, or noticed something wrong. That's the central question this documentary is built to answer, or at least narrow down, what can actually be established about Nolan Wells' final hours and what still can't.
As many of you know, his 19th birthday is next Wednesday. And it's, as the days gets closer, it's definitely getting harder. That realization is really sinking in. That we don't have our son physically here anymore. And I think a lot of people have forgotten. Only thing we want to know is what happened. That's all we want to know, is what happened to our son. Because many parents out there, you still have your children. You still can hug them. You still can call them. You still can celebrate their life with them. And we do not have that anymore. Our lives have forever changed. This new normal is something I would never wish on anyone, not even my worst enemy. The hurt that we feel daily, the conversations that we have to have, not just with each other, but also with our other children as they are grieving as well. So we ask that everyone, please, next Wednesday, join us in prayer. As for us as a family, but also too for everyone out there, but especially for Nolan and the process that we're going through. And again, we thank you so much. Children, as they are grieving as well. So we ask that everyone, please, next Wednesday, join us in prayer. As for us as a family, but also too for everyone out there, but especially for Nolan and the process that we're going through. And again, we thank you so much.
In 3 days, on August 19th, 2026, Nolan Xavier Wells was supposed to turn 19. He won't. More than 6 weeks have now passed since he went missing on July 4th, when he boarded a boat on the Mississippi coast and rowed roughly 10 miles out to a barrier island called Horn Island to watch fireworks with a group of friends. 2 days later, on July 6th, his body was recovered along that same shoreline. He played wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College. He graduated from Ocean Springs High School in the class of 2025. And there's one detail about him that sounds small the first time you hear it, and then doesn't let go once you understand what it means. Nolan didn't drive. Hold on to that. A kid who doesn't drive is a kid whose entire life runs on other people saying yes. Every practice, every party, every ordinary Saturday, somebody else decided he was coming along and somebody else decided he was getting home. On July 4th, somebody said yes. It's about the most unremarkable decision an 18-year-old on that coast could make on a holiday weekend. He never came home from it. This isn't a story about a reckless decision. It's a story about an 18-year-old doing the single most normal thing available to him that weekend and not surviving it. If you want documented updates as this case develops, subscribe to Every Crime.
I mean, he's on the phone. Don't you like? Wouldn't you think that you would have seen Nolan on the bottom of on the floor or something, or scrambling around, or everybody in a pot like in a small space on the boat looking at him or something? I mean that you.
What an absolute wild thing to say when so many people have seen this video and slowed it down and noticed that there's either like a hand or a foot or something that comes flying up when they tug on the toe right there. Like, I can't believe that they said that. But please, please, please put out this interview. Please give me something to tear apart. Y'all, I swear I see Warren stop breathing when he starts this sentence, and he doesn't move again until he closes it out. Watch. They try to cover it up with an edit.
On the phone, don't you like? Wouldn't you think that you would have seen Nolan on the bottom of on the floor or something, or scrambling around, or everybody in a pot like in a small space on the boat looking at him or something? I mean that.
Let's go through a speed run of the information. We can now definitively say that this is Jax. We can also now definitively say that this is Morgan. He's wearing the same hat as well as the same bracelets. So where were they on the Triton? Now that we've got a much clearer video thanks to Officer Tatum, it's obvious that there is nobody in an orange swimsuit or a paisley swimsuit on this boat. We also barely see that there's somebody here in the red shorts. Now, in this Katie Snapchat picture, I've been saying that there was somebody in the background here wearing red shorts. So I pumped up the exposure, and as you can see, it certainly looks like it. They seemingly have similar body types as well as similar hairlines. We also know that whoever was in the red shorts was also on the shoreline when the fight broke out. Now, who was involved in that fight? Warren's brother, Carter. Carter, who trains in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And by Warren's own admission, his brother put someone in an arm bar. And in case you don't know what that looks like, go ahead and look at that placement on the back of the head there. Spot look familiar? Given Carter's height, build, body type, this looks like it could be him. But one blurry, underexposed picture is not solid proof of anything, right? But we know Warren grabbed his younger brother and had him come over hang out with them on their boat as they were sinking or whatever. And it would be pretty bad for their case if this was Carter on the Triton and then on Katie's boat at 6 o'clock. But now my attention turns to this person who a lot of people think is Bart. But in his hand, he is holding a cell phone. So I thought, why would Bart jump from his boat to the other boat holding a cell phone when other people have cell phones in their hands while Wyatt is on the phone in the picture? So while I was trying to compare pictures of Bart to the person on the boat that I can't identify, I found this picture with him with a tattoo from about 2 years ago. And it wasn't until just today that I stopped looking at the tattoo and I started looking at his wrist. Because someone in the background of this picture has always stuck out to me because my instinct always was like, is that Bart? Bart seemingly has a pretty pronounced mullet as according to this picture. But this was definitely not on Bart's boat. I checked the seating and the covers, like it's not Bart's boat. Now, I think you pretty much get where I'm going with this because then I remembered this bracelet. Pretty unique bracelet. Unique like the bracelet that Bart Jr. was wearing in that tattoo picture. And right here looks like it might be the tail end of a tattoo that wraps around the forearm, right in the same place that it would be on Bart. I've said for a while now that the story about them calling Bart that morning to go out on the boat never made sense, because what 21-year-old didn't already have plans for 4th of July? So then the question is, who is driving Bart's boat? Which brings me back to this guy who some people have thought looked like Bart. However, we do know that he was on Bart's boat handing out drinks to people in that 7-second clip we've seen. Same hair, same glasses, same hat. By the way, did y'all know that Bart has a younger brother? The family resemblance is very striking. I mean,
While attorneys have held press conferences, independent researchers online have spent 6 weeks doing something slower and messier, pulling whatever public footage exists, adjusting exposure on dark clips, trying to reconstruct who was on which boat and when. That work has no subpoena power or chain of custody behind it. Here's how we're handling it. Online analysis is not the same category as confirmed fact, and we're not going to blur the two. Nobody who was on that boat trip has been charged with any crime. Attorneys representing several of the young men present that day have stated on the record that their clients are innocent. That statement carries the same weight as everything else here. Independent viewers going frame by frame through available footage have raised questions about boat occupancy, who friends and family say was present versus who does or doesn't appear in the clearest video, captured in part by an officer's own camera. Some researchers have argued that a particular individual visible in that footage resembles Carter, a younger relative of one of the boat's occupants, pointing to build, hairline, and a bracelet visible in an earlier photo. That is not a confirmed identification. The image in question is blurry, and there has been no public official confirmation naming anyone in it. If an identification like that were eventually confirmed through reliable means, it could matter to the timeline. Here's what's actually confirmed more than 6 weeks in. 2 autopsies were conducted. One commissioned independently by Nolan's family, one by the state of Mississippi. The family's exam returned a finding of undetermined, pending further investigation. The state's report was reportedly completed by the end of July, meaning it is now sat unreleased for roughly 2 weeks. District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath has stated the report stays sealed until a grand jury reviews it, which her office describes as standard procedure for any death in the county that isn't clearly a natural cause or a non-criminal accident. Investigators have interviewed approximately 60 witnesses. The FBI has been brought in specifically for digital evidence. Confirmed, from the sheriff's own public statement in the days after the recovery, no evidence of foul play had been identified at that point. Reported from a separate public request by the same office, investigators asked anyone with original, unedited footage from the island that day to come forward, specifically footage of any altercation. Neither statement explains the other. Both are part of the public record more than 6 weeks later. It's worth sitting with how unremarkable July 4th was supposed to be, because that's part of what makes this hard to process. 4th of July on the Mississippi coast means boats. It means barrier islands crowded with people from Ocean Springs, Biloxi, and Gulfport, out for open water and a clean view of fireworks. Horn Island draws that crowd every year. Federally protected, mostly undeveloped, no bridges, no roads, just sand, low dune grass, and on a night like the 4th, dozens of anchored boats and a lot of teenagers who've been making this same trip since middle school. Nolan wasn't doing anything unusual. Multiple boats, multiple friend groups, people moving between vessels throughout the afternoon and into the evening, the way people do at a gathering that doesn't really have edges. That detail matters for everything that follows, because it means there was never one clean account of who was where. There were dozens of people, several boats, hours of movement, and very little official footage covering all of it. What footage does exist has become the entire foundation of everything that's happened publicly since July 4th. A sealed file doesn't make people stop looking for answers, it just moves the looking somewhere the county can't control. Before going further, it's worth laying out the strongest argument made by the other side, because a documentary that only presents one direction isn't documentation, it's advocacy. The attorneys representing these young men have made a specific, fair point publicly. Horn Island on July 4th is not an empty stretch of coastline where something could happen unnoticed. It's a narrow barrier island with almost no tree cover, and on a holiday weekend it draws thousands of people and dozens of boats packed onto a strip of sand with essentially nowhere to disappear to. Their argument is that the location's visibility that afternoon makes any theory involving deliberate harm in daylight difficult to reconcile with the physical setting. That's a real argument, not a talking point to dismiss. A crowded public beach is genuinely a hard place to hide something. It's also worth being precise about what that argument does and doesn't answer. No one credible following this case has publicly claimed Nolan was harmed in front of a crowd on the beach in daylight. The open questions driving more than 6 weeks of public attention are about what happened later, after the fireworks, after the crowd thinned, on the return trip, after dark, with a much smaller group. A visible, crowded beach at 6 p.m. doesn't tell us much about a boat on open water after 9. That's where this documentary turns next. Everything discussed so far can be argued over. Memories, photographs, interpretations, even who appears to be standing on a boat in a blurry frame. Digital evidence is different. If the investigators have the relevant phones, the question becomes much simpler. What do the timestamps actually show? The FBI has been brought in specifically for digital evidence. A phone can hold things memory can't. Timestamps, call logs, message threads, location data, photos and video nobody's seen publicly, app activity showing what someone was doing and when, before and after the trip. The FBI's reported role here doesn't by itself establish what investigators believe happened. It tells us the digital evidence is significant enough to warrant federal technical assistance. What exactly investigators are looking for on those devices hasn't been publicly disclosed. That's an unknown, and it's one of the most important ones in this case, because whatever it eventually shows will likely matter more than every frame-by-frame photo comparison combined. Eyewitness memory, 6 weeks removed from a chaotic day involving multiple boats, alcohol, a crowd of teenagers, and a tragedy nobody was prepared for, is not reliable in the way a timestamp is reliable. A verified digital record doesn't misremember order or timing. If the phones in this case ever become part of the public record, they're likely to resolve more genuine disputes in an afternoon than 6 weeks of online frame-by-frame analysis have managed so far. There's also a narrower, more practical version of this question worth naming directly. Nolan's own phone, wherever it ended up, whatever condition it's in, may or may not be recoverable at all. If it isn't, the digital record this documentary is describing may exist only on other people's devices, filtered through whatever they chose to keep, delete, or hand over voluntarily. That distinction matters. A complete picture in a partial one can look identical in a press release right up until the moment a case actually goes to trial. If you want us to keep following the evidence as it comes out, stay with this case. There's a second, related open question. What does surveillance footage from the boat launch, the adjoining marinas, and the route back actually show, and why hasn't any of it been seen by the public? If cameras along that route captured boats returning that night, that footage could establish, independently of anyone's memory, who came back, when, and in what order. That's exactly the kind of evidence that would either support or contradict the accounts already given publicly. Whether that footage exists in a form investigators can use, whether it's already been reviewed, and whether it will ever be released are all unknown right now. The public has not seen that footage, so we cannot honestly say what it shows. The question isn't whether that footage proves wrongdoing. Nobody outside the investigation has seen it, so no one can honestly claim that. The question is simpler, and it's the one the public keeps returning to. What does the footage show, and why is it still sealed?
The Coast Guard call came in at approximately 11 o'clock that night, hours after the group had reportedly already returned from the island. The working assumption offered publicly in that moment was that Nolan was still out on Horn Island, alone after dark. That assumption is worth examining on its own terms. If the rest of the group made it back safely, the more immediate question is what happened to Nolan somewhere between the island and home, not whether he simply chose to stay behind by himself on an island at night. Why that specific belief was the one acted on, hours after the group returned, is something the public record doesn't yet explain. What did the people involved believe was happening at that moment? That's not a question we can answer for them. At some point that same night, a Sea Tau rescue call was placed on Nolan's behalf and later canceled. Reporting has pointed to Nolan's own grandfather as the person who made that cancellation call. There's no confirmed reason for it. That's not a gap we're going to fill with speculation, because it's exactly the kind of detail that's easy to spin into something sinister and just as easy to explain innocently: a miscommunication about the group's location, a mistaken belief that Nolan had already made it home safely, or context the public simply hasn't seen.
What we can say is that this remains one more moment in the night's timeline without a public, documented explanation. It raises a practical question that hasn't been answered either. What information did the family have in real time that led to a rescue call going out and then being pulled back only a short time later? Either someone believed, even briefly, that Nolan was in genuine danger on the water that night, or the call was made out of general precaution and withdrawn once it seemed unnecessary. Those are two very different versions of that night. Right now, the record doesn't tell us which one actually happened. Describing the day itself, one of the young men said something to the effect of he wished the group had never gone out that day at all, and that he thinks about it every day. Later, asked directly whether he'd do anything differently, his answer was that there wasn't much he'd change, that from his and his friend's point of view, they did everything right. The statement is worth sitting with, not because word choice can establish guilt, it can't, and viewers who've read either sentence as proof of something are reading further into it than the words themselves support. What the statement actually leaves is an open question. What specifically did they believe they'd done right that night? The public record doesn't yet contain an answer to that either. It's entirely possible the honest answer is that nothing more happened here than a genuine accident on the water followed by poor judgment and panic rather than anything worse. That possibility is real, and it deserves to be treated as real, not dismissed, because it's a less dramatic outcome than the one much of the internet has already decided on.
In 3 days, in a house in Ocean Springs, a mother will wake up on what should have been her son's 19th birthday. She'll wake up the way she's woken up every morning since July 4th, still without the one thing she's asked for publicly, over and over for more than 6 weeks. Not an arrest, not a verdict, just the truth about her son's last hours. There's a version of this story that ends with that report finally released, a grand jury acting, and a family getting the sentence they've been missing since July. This is how your son died. There's another version where the file stays sealed for months, where the questions outlast the news cycle, and where clarity never fully arrives. Both outcomes are still possible right now. Neither one changes what's already true, that a young man who needed someone else to say yes just to get to that island in the first place never got the same certainty on the way back. We're not going to tell you what to conclude. We're not going to claim this was murder. We're not going to claim it was definitely an accident. The honest position, more than 6 weeks in, is simple. We don't know yet, and that's exactly why the evidence still matters. If there's a real update in this case, the report, an arrest, anything confirmed, we'll bring it to you the moment it's verified. Subscribe to Every Crime and let us know in the comments where you're watching from.